All right, welcome to another episode of New Wine Uncorked. And as always, we're coming to you live on YouTube, and it's Friday, which means so many things for so many different people. One of the things I try not to do in the morning is hit social media, but for some reason, I don't know, and I was reading and, people have conversations and things of the big things that are going on this weekend. And it made me start to think about what we've been talking about, coming off of Halloween. And then it seems like, and I don't know, maybe this is within the context of the American culture, but it seems like we've jumped. I mean, I haven't seen much from Thanksgiving or push into Thanksgiving. It seems like we jumped right from Halloween to then Christmas or the holiday festivals, and I'm just wondering, it made me stop to think because, at New Wine Uncorked, because we're New Wine seeks to build relational bridges in contemporary culture through Jesus Christ, which that in and of itself, the whole push is the realm of Thanksgiving. I was talking with a student that I'm working with, supervising a DMin project, a doctor of ministry, and we were talking about presencing and being presence, but how if the Christian is living and loving as a Christ follower, is not our life all about Thanksgiving? And that's worship. A lot of times you go to church on Sundays and they'll say, oh, we're going to do this prayer, we're going to do this sermon, and then we're going to worship. And just thinking about, like, might it be a case in today's culture where we just skip from Halloween, ghosts and goblins to holiday festivals, which is just candy and eating and food, and then people, they really want to make it about fellowship. And I was just thinking, can that be the case? Like, is it too harsh for the Christian to say, without Jesus in the mix, without the Holy Spirit drawing us in, there really can't be authentic fellowship, because then there is no Thanksgiving, there is no worship. And so what is the Christian to do in today's culture, living and loving as a Christ follower? And that's the topic of today. That's what we're going to be talking about. And so we're stoked to have you all here. Right there beneath the video, if you're live on YouTube right now, you just hit subscribe, and that way every Friday you'll be notified. You can also go over to Twitter and follow New Wineskins at NWNWS. And also you'll be notified because in the morning, maybe that's why I was on Twitter. I was helping everyone know. But it is a weird thing. Social media and all these things, they press into us. And so have they made us less thankful? And I don't know if in your context, each one of you, amidst COVID, amidst political, tensions, have we lost the sense of Thanksgiving?
They're not just losing Thanksgiving. Like yesterday was Veterans Day. Like,
Hmm,
did we recognize yesterday was Veterans?
good
I
point.
worked yesterday. There was no day off. My daughter was at home. But yeah, we just skip over that. I have a friend just not too far away from me. She did a veteran. She has a restaurant or a food cart, and she had a veterans eat free thing going on yesterday. So she was giving away plates to veterans. Took a lot of pictures and the like. But yeah, we definitely are. And it's not that I don't think that in our homes we necessarily do that because I think right now we're all looking for excuses to get together with family and the like because we haven't been able to do that over the last year. So yeah, looking forward to Thanksgiving. I had a friend last year where Thanksgiving was the first time he got together with his family since COVID started last Thanksgiving, and so he was really looking forward to it. And in fact, being I think he's in his 50s, and it was the first time he hosted Thanksgiving dinner at his house. so and so it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool for him. So yeah, I think we have markets that's kind of pushing us into the next thing we're going to spend a lot of money, and it's on us to think, hey, when can I find time to get with my family and cook some food and just have a time where we sit down and stare at football. So yeah.
Yeah, I just the weird thing is though, Phil, is that with Thanksgiving and things, I don't know if people feel in the midst of COVID, because there's been so much loss, that it's not okay to be thankful, because all around us, I would imagine that each one of us has been touched by the tragedy of COVID, and when there's loss, when there's sickness, when there's death, it's hard sometimes to be thankful. And if the people that are in this culture, this society, that are meant to be joyful in all things, folks who live and love as Christ followers, again, how is society supposed to be reminded of what thankfulness is? So often when I was growing up as a kid, Thanksgiving was about the food, and it was about the football, and those things are both great. I'm excited because for the first time in a while, my brother's a pilot, but he's going to be home on Thanksgiving, and so he's invited us. But to be real, and this is the hard thing, is that with our gathering, there's going to be, we then have to, I don't know if we're making a big deal about it, but there's this truth of like, then when you get together with people, what do you do with COVID? Do you worry about vaccinations and unvaccinated people? And so that's where I think sometimes, as a Christian, is it over spiritualizing something where we say, hey, you know what, we're going to go get together with a group of people. We know that there are some that are unvaccinated, but because of living and loving as a Christ follower, I don't want to over spiritualize it for them, but for us, before we go, let's spend some time in prayer. Let's spend some time covering ourselves, because we know we're going into a situation. I mean, I'm fine with it in the sense of medically, because my wife and I, my kids, Kayla's in the process of it, we've got the vaccination. We've actually got the booster shot, and the third shot. And yet there's still a wonder of, okay, but I know people are getting sick. So not wanting to over spiritualize, but still wanting to live, and not wanting to be the Christian who's like reminding people, oh my gosh, well, you're not vaccinated, and so you're a piece of this, and I can't deal with you. Because Jesus still hung out with the lepers. Jesus still hung out with the people who theoretically had COVID, where you could come in contact with them and you could get sick by being with them. And yet he never wavered. And I just wonder if we forget, because he spent so much time in prayer, that's our booster shot, right? Every day, every moment of the day, we have the ability to inject ourselves with the power of the living God through prayer. And so, I want, as Christians, maybe to step further into and say, what power are we given so that we can step into these kind of, uneasy realms and still be confident that that's what Paul writes in Romans 8, that nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. And he goes through a litany of all created things. Well, believe it or not, we heard over the last 2 years, COVID is either naturally created or created in a laboratory or whatever the case, but it's a created thing. So again, where's the Christian without being like that uber kind of weird cultish spirituality, but being true with our faith and going, hey, look, this is the power that God's given us, so that we could, so maybe, I don't know if our lack of understanding celebrations and Thanksgiving is because the Christian is absent in today's culture.
I guess I see it in two different ways. So like, Thanksgiving for us is just, it's just this gathering. It's a gathering of friends. It's a gathering of family. I mean, growing up, my dad coached football at Willamette University in Salem. And so because of the connection with a lot of the Hawaiians, I mean, our house was like, filled with people that weren't going back home to Hawaii or, were there for Thanksgiving. So, so I mean, our Thanksgiving was like you said, it was like meal together, but it was like all these football players or girlfriends. It meant wearing like clothes with elastic bands on it. You eat, fall asleep, you wake up, you eat, and you're stepping over bodies. And so it was just really this gathering. And I remember, when we had Thanksgiving with Glenna's family, and it was like, I come down with like sweatpants and a t-shirt, and she's like, what, And I'm like, well, we always wear this. This is how, she goes, no, my parents, it's nice, And then like we get to their house and their table is set, right? And I'm thinking, I've never sat at a table and used silverware on the table for like my entire life. And so for me, so Thanksgiving has always been, family and bringing in people for just like what you're talking about, those opportunities with brothers and sisters and things like that. But I think for us, because my daughter and my granddaughter, my mo'opuna, she's 2 years old. And so really our concern is for her. So like when we start talking about people, hey, who's going to come or who can, who should we have? Or I mean, I'm like, hey, Megan, so how do you feel about this person? Right. I mean, and it's even my own niece, because, Megan will say, well, it's fine, but our niece, her children are going to daycare, so they're exposed more, and it's just kind of like, that's it, right? I mean, it doesn't get into a long discussion. I'm not trying to convince her, hey, but this is Ohana and all that. I mean, and so I think for us at that point, it just, we have chosen to kind of protect her, right? And so I think that's part of it. But I think, when you become part of a larger community, you want to protect people, but also you want to give people the space. And so I think that's the harder part is, for me, it becomes protecting myself, right? Maybe it is more prayer. Maybe it is knowing that people will be coming to church that aren't vaccinated. And I'm not going to say, well, you can't come. But it's, it's those caution, I mean, for me, it becomes my responsibility, right? It's, if I want to be careful, or if I'm concerned about others, it becomes my responsibility to, because, isn't it about just inviting people? And so we're so worried about making it the responsibility of other people. And again, it just boils down to, I'm grateful for the relationships. I mean, I'm grateful for people that even want to come to worship at this point, but also being cautious. And so I think it's just, I think Thanksgiving is, it's, when it comes to Thanksgiving as a gathering of Ohana and family and things like that, I think it's one thing, but I think when it comes to Thanksgiving, as far as the worship celebration, yeah, I think we do need to be praying. Not that we shouldn't be praying with family, but I think that's probably one of the better ways of protecting ourselves instead of putting demands on others. And then it gives them the, bottom line for us, it's just, how do we give people the freedom, right? The freedom to enjoy, the freedom to just, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance also with the amount of loss that people have experienced over the past, couple of years now, with COVID and other things that have gone on. And, sometimes that makes it harder to celebrate or be thankful. But I think also for a lot of us, it has brought this perspective of, I really appreciate these people that I have around me. And I am so thankful that I get to celebrate with my family, that I have not, lost this person or this person. Maybe I've lost, someone else, but I have these people still. And so that has been a cool perspective, at least for me, because of COVID and because of other events in the past couple of years, where a lot of people have died. And we get to still, I am very thankful that we get to still celebrate and give thanks, and that I am healthy, and that I do have my family, and that we can choose to celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas together. And I think that, yeah, we do have to be mindful of our health, and that is mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And so what do we do, to be mindful of that? I think that prayer has to be an essential factor. But I also think that, yeah, there has to be, if we're going to claim to, love this Jesus, follow this Jesus, we also have to have some kind of faith and trust that when we pray prayers and ask for his protection, he will protect us. And this Thanksgiving meal is, like you said, Jim, it is an invitation of, we are inviting people to get together and fellowship. I think some of my favorite memories of Thanksgiving, because I've had a lot of family that isn't really biological because of moving and living everywhere. Our family was our church. And so wherever we were at that time, it was, friends from school, but it was our church. And one of my favorite memories of Thanksgiving was probably the years in Scotland, because we had a church hall, and we would walk like down the block from the church to the church hall all together as an entire congregation. And we would sit, and it was like kind of the Last Supper kind of feel. Like we had these big long tables, and we would just serve each other. And actually a lot of the elders, these sweet old ladies, would be like, no, we are serving you. Like, we want to serve you. And we would just eat, and we would talk, and as kids would run around and play. And it was so much fun. And that is worship. That is fellowship. And I want us as the church here in America to be able to do the same thing, right? Where we come together as this family of Christ and we're able to worship and fellowship with each other all year round, regardless of holidays.
Wow, you're more indigenous than I am. No, because, Kayla, I mean, I think you bring up a great point though. Isn't Thanksgiving about looking back? I mean, it's a reflection about what God's done in my life. And then, I mean, because like, you were sharing when you're in Scotland, is it Scotland or Ireland? Scotland?
Scotland, yeah.
Is that where they serve haggis? Did you guys have haggis for Thanksgiving? It's like, can I have the dark meat of haggis and the white meat? Can I, and so like
Haggis burgers, dude.
Haggis, that talk about memorable, but you know what I mean? What you talk about and just shared. I mean, I think, as a dad, I mean, I don't know how you felt, Matt, but I mean, if my daughter shared those, because it's, you're kind of moving your family and you're going through all these places and they're there to support you. But then, for Kayla to say, hey, this was a great memory. I mean, that's like, to me, that's what Thanksgiving's about, right? I mean, it's just those memories that you have and reflecting back. And so, I mean, maybe that's part of the, Thanksgiving is that looking forward to forging those relationships and memories and doing things together. And then, you look back on it. I mean, and that's what brings Thanksgiving. That's what brings us to a place where we think, oh, I mean, throughout the scriptures, we're talked about remembering. And so, I mean, maybe that's part of Thanksgiving is just that, piece of remembering. But, Matt, I think the other thing too, you brought up about, social media. I mean, I think that messes things up because I don't think it gives us those moments to say, just to be able to be thankful, right? Because like now on my email, I am getting stuff from various stores saying, hey, Black Friday starts now, and then, but it gets you back in that mentality of consumer. It gets you back in that mentality of, wanting again. It's, it's not an attitude of Thanksgiving. It's an attitude of like, oh yeah, I got to go, this is the next thing we have to buy or get or whatever. But I think we need to be intentional about making sure that we don't let those things creep into our lives and just take that moment and just, I mean, even in the church, that's what can happen. It's, instead of like just living in the moment, it's like, okay, now we got to figure out, we got Advent coming up. Now we got to decorate. We got to come up with all these things. And it just, even in that, it doesn't give us a chance to breathe together or even just to say, you know what? I'm just really grateful that our church opened up finally for the first time, or that nobody's died in our church, or I mean, those kind of things, to being intentional about the Thanksgiving.
Yeah, in this season in particular, just Kayla, you mentioned it a moment ago, just there's been so much loss over the past couple of years where it's just, we got to take those times to rally with the family that we have, with the friends that we have, the people that are closest to us, and just embrace this time. And the memories kind of, they kind of create themselves. Yeah, you'll remember the uncle that falls asleep on the couch and or the dude that falls asleep on the floor or whatever. And all those things will be, yeah, that's Jim. I know, definitely that's Jim. But having the excuse to get these families together just to celebrate that, yeah, we've gone through a lot over these past years, so let's be thankful for what we have here, and the memories that will be created going forward. So definitely, this is a time that, and again, it's on us individuals. I mean, we're gonna get the emails that tell us, that Best Buy is having, Black Friday starts today, and whatever. But we're gonna get all those messages, and yeah, but if we're gonna have to slow down and say, no, let's live in this moment, embrace what's going on right now, and even walking into Advent. I mean, it's there can be a little bit of hoopla involving Advent at times, but remember what we're doing. We're celebrating waiting. This is what we're celebrating. So let's walk into those moments and take advantage of that moment, that slowing down, of that peace that comes connected to it. So.
Yeah, the waiting part, don't you think that's the hardest for the human in general, but for sure Americans, because as both of you were saying, the pull, the temptation for consumerism, to consume. And when we seek to consume, we lose sight of the presence. I've been reading the philosopher Martin Heidegger a little bit, and this other book, The Expulsion of the Other by Byung-Chul Han, who's a South Korean born German philosopher, Swiss German philosopher. Talk about and he talks about how what happens is there's a flattening out. with over communication, social media, that we all seek sameness. So there's no distinction anymore. And, that happens with consumerism because we seek to consume which is in front of us. And then when we consume these things, because all these advertisements are telling us what? How to become the same. Like if we're all driving this car, then we are this. If we're all taking this medicine, if we're all taking this vitamin, if we're all wearing this jacket, if we're all watching this movie, and there's this sameness to where then it flattens out the human to where then we have no distinction. And then that's where then we lose ourselves, and so when there's a loss of identity, and this is where I'm wondering just what the Christian's role is in the 21st century, because we see this loss of identity. We see this transition where people are confused. We have folks who are in transition to something. Well, the reality is the Christian has been in transition since the garden, right? And so the Christian shouldn't be afraid of people who say, well, I'm in transition, I'm trans, because what we should be doing is maybe asking, well, what are you transitioning into, as because it's a question of being. It's a question of who we are. And I wonder sometimes is we've been in such a transitory model or mode of thinking, because since most people will go back to pre-COVID days and then post-COVID days, this is, and I don't know what fairness or anything of equating or seeking to compare. This is the thing, and this is another thing of Hans, and then also even of some of the philosophers, is once we compare, then it's calculative, and all we do is we categorize the person in front of us, so they lose their personality, because we're trying to compare this time to what times before, and it's obviously different because today is today, and with the social media and all these things. But then why do we compare it, trying to make it what? Worse than before, less than before, instead of just sitting in the moment. Robin Williams, teacher, in Dead Poets Society, right? Carpe diem, you seize the moment. And so often I feel like there's one of two ways people do take that. They so seek to seize the moment that they take in everything so that they make themselves sick, and they become sick to where the consumerism overwhelms them, and so it's an extreme of everything. Or the opposite side is an absolute isolationist, and so carpe diem means I seize the moment for myself. You mean nothing. You are just a hindrance. And so I feel like we're caught in the in-between here, in the lack of the church, like you're saying, Jim. Like, instead of celebrating, hey, we're here together on Sunday, most people, I think, walk into the church and go, oh, depending on where they're at, right? If I walk in with my mask, I look around and go, they're not wearing a mask. They're not wearing, oh, look at them. If I don't have a mask on, I walk in going, what are they wearing a mask, or where they're not vaccinated, or what they're not, and so then we automatically come in. And I remember when I was taking classes at Multnomah, Metzger would use C.S. Lewis in his Space trilogy, where the unmanned gives the male and the female a mirror. And the reflection no more is a reflection of something beyond, but when we look at the mirror, it's a reflection of me. And so this is Hans' point in the expulsion of the other, is that what we do when we look at the person in front of us is no longer do we see an other, we see sameness, we see me, we see what we want. And so that when we have discussions like Thanksgiving or celebration like worship, it is so self-centered that no matter what we like, we'll tack on, we'll talk about Jesus, we'll talk about being thankful, go around the Thanksgiving table and say what we're thankful for. But there's no real authenticity there, because if we were thankful for one another, wouldn't we do this fellowshipping more often?
Matt, it's like whenever you bring stuff up, it's like a smorgasbord, right? You're setting up these like stations of stuff to choose from. And so I'm not even going to try to answer everything you said. All I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to this one little station that you brought up. But I think this idea of flattening identity is key, is because I think, this, and it's interesting because the identity and talking about we lose our identity, but I mean, isn't that what Jesus calls us to do? He calls us to lose our identity. And so that, like, even when Peter asks him, hey, when Jesus says, well, who do you say I am? And he says, oh, the Messiah. Even Peter wasn't exactly sure what he was saying when he said that, right? I mean, he kind of gave his impression of what the Messiah should be. And then, I mean, in his idea, in his mind, Jesus knows, hey, it's power. I mean, from what he understood the kingdom to be, it was all those things. That's why they were fighting for that. But then Jesus says, no, wait a minute. Okay. And he basically kind of tells them what Messiah is. It's like Messiah is going to come. He's going to, he's going to be crucified. He's going to, he's going to have the snot kicked out of him by the religious leaders, and he's going to die. And, and Peter's like, no, because that's, that's my, that's not in my brochure, right? And so then Jesus has to reshape, what is the identity? What's our identity? And then basically he says, to be a follower of me, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. I mean, it's this idea of self-love and self-sacrifice, right? I mean, it's about, and so that, I think our identity, you're so right, is because we're allowing society to give us our identity. You ride in this car and it's kind of like, it's just that, reflection when people use, I think we talked about it last week about we're going to make America great again. Well, what does great mean, right? So, we have this idea of, say, if you have this TV or if you have this car, I mean, people like reflect this image of like, oh yeah, this is what it's going to be like, but it's really not going to be like that, right? I mean, that's not real life. And so I think you're so right. I mean, I think we're allowing the society to create our identity, but really that's not what our identity is. And we are to break free from that identity. And so, I mean, the identity that Christ calls us to, it is not good. I mean, it is, to deny yourself, to take up your cross. I mean, to look at the other, right? I mean, to look at the other with love, with respect. I mean, that's what it calls for. And so I think that's, that whole identity thing is so key, and that we, and I think sometimes what happens is that we try to proof text our life so that what the identity of the world tells us is, we try to use the scriptures to back that up, and that's just not right. I mean, that's just, and so how do we, and I think we talked about it last week, and Kayla talked, I mean, she said, it's the Holy Spirit, it's prayer, it's having, these multiple conversations. But I think part of the identity thing is that we are about breaking free of the identity that we're creating, right? That we're creating. And and I think that's part of the Thanksgiving. So getting back to your Thanksgiving, because then we can't be thankful for, because we are working so hard to match up, and instead of being self-sacrificing, we're, giving. I mean, talk about feeling good about, when you start to give. I don't know about you, but I feel good when I can give. I mean, not just out of, obligation, and it changes people's attitude. I mean, when anybody has an opportunity to think, or has an opportunity to give, I mean, they can have the worst of days, the worst of life, but when you can bless somebody, I mean, talk about a heart of Thanksgiving and a heart. I mean, and so it's just interesting that, and so I think, I think it's the Thanksgiving really begins with having just the attitude of Christ and just being sacrificial for others and having a heart of giving.
And the giving part is key. Yesterday, it was interesting because, we had a first world problem. Our microwave went out, and, we rent, and that's we'll have a new Wine Uncorked on whether a Christian can be a landlord, in today's culture. But so we rent, and it was hard because the owner, the landlord, and I would have done the same thing to save money, wanted to come over and put the microwave in, with me. And it's a weird relationship, landlord and tenant kind of thing anyways. And I found myself before having to just get into the right place of being thankful that he was willing to give his time, and he was willing to come over and spend time in the home and put this in. It wasn't what I had chosen, but what I had chosen is in the morning to say, Lord, let this day be yours, and so thy will be done. And that's, it sounds funny when I tell people, okay, so when I'm talking with students or working, meeting with folks from the church, and I'll say, starting the day out by giving it over to the Lord, saying, Lord, use me this day. Let me be an instrument of thy peace, right? And so when those moments present themselves, at least I find myself, 98% of the time or whatever percentage going, this isn't exactly what I was thinking, Lord. So could we just back up a little bit? And here's what I was expecting to happen during this day, right? And so those are the moments where I feel like he teaches me what it means to give thanks. And it's a gift, the giving thanks so often, I think within the Christian realm is we give thanks to God. Absolutely. But might it be that the way we truly give thanks is the way that we love is to love those and give thanks to those in front of us? And that's what Jesus is saying, is that you love the other when you love me by loving the other. Lord, Lord, when did we clothe you? Lord, Lord, when did we feed you? And he says, when you did it to the least of these. Well, the least of these is actually, in today's culture, we'd see least and we would say, oh, that's less than. But for Jesus, the least of these is actually a place of honor and respect in the kingdom of God. The first will be last, the last will be first. I don't take that mentality on so often, because when myself is in front and everything that I see is centered through my own perspective, like you're saying, Jim, it loses the other. So this identity, it becomes the identity that the world's telling me to grab onto, so the Thanksgiving of the cultural identity is the soldier and the woman. Thank you, Lord, that I am not her. Thank you, Lord, that I'm not him, or the sinners kneeling down here. That's the thankfulness that we have. Oh gosh, thankful that I own my 2 car. Oh gosh. And they hear my story and they're like, well, we own our home, and there's these weird societal kind of like badges of, well, if you have this badge, well, then you can be thankful because you're better off, And so I wonder, for me, when I get sucked into that, though, it goes back to that community like Kayla was talking about, like for us and traveling and things, there's always a reason to give thanks. When I'm surrounded by people, though, who are maybe caught up in, I don't know what, where just their life perspective is not thankfulness. It's everything is critique. This person's not good enough. This situation's not, because it's so self-centered that if I don't get what I want, then everything else sucks, And yet when I surround myself and I center myself, not only in scripture and through the Spirit, prayer, but people who really are pressing into this like you said, Jim, the life that Jesus presents is not one where you're like, yes, I was reading this quotation from Michael Gungor. They did the beautiful things, and he was asking about, like, is love of money really the root of all things, of evil? Is it the root of all evil? And I mean, that's not what the Bible says. It's the root of all kinds of evil, but it's not the money. It's the love of something first and foremost besides Jesus Christ. That's what the scripture says. So again, clarifying, if a person's not Christian and they don't follow Christ, then the love that's in their heart is not going to be Jesus. So to expect them to live at a level or with an intentionality that the church is called to live is ridiculous. We're just going to, and so that's where with this Thanksgiving, I want to have that attitude that you were talking about, Jim. That Paul outlines in Philippians 2, have this attitude in you that was Christ, that he sought. Here's this dude again, it goes back to the baptism and the masking and all that kind of thing. Jesus didn't have a need to be baptized for his sin, right? He didn't have sin. He didn't need to be cleansed of sin. And yet he does this for who? And that's what I always have to ask myself. I know it sounds so cheesy and 90-ish, I think it was the 90s with the WWJD. I sort of remember that. I think that was when I was maybe coming into junior high or something like that, with the big, the bracelets they would hand out, and it would say WWJD. And I was like, maybe we forgot to ask ourselves this on a daily basis. What would Jesus do? Or maybe we forgot to say, what is the Spirit doing in me so that I can be thanksgiving for the sake of the world?
When you were talking about your landlord, so this idea of Thanksgiving, there was a guy that when we moved in with my mother or my grandmother-in-law, didn't have any, we had to take our clothes to the laundromat. And so that's always kind of an experience when you're sitting there and having to be there the whole time so nobody steals your clothes, and, the clientele, I mean, just an assortment of wonderful, interesting people. But, but we had a guy in the church that I was the youth pastor for. He came in and he basically, his name was Spud, heard what we were doing. He goes, "Oh, I'm an electrician. Let me put the, let me hook up your house so that you have electricity." But I was thinking what he did was he was giving thanks. I mean, he was giving me the opportunity to be thankful. And so like when as what you're talking about, sometimes I think when we think about Thanksgiving, sometimes it's about thanking me, or something where I can be thankful. But maybe, the attitude when you're talking, I'm wondering, and I need to kind of figure this out, but maybe it's the giving so that others can be thankful, right? I mean, maybe that's what Thanksgiving is really about, is that something that I can do, not necessarily that they would thank me, but also because I know when Spud put that electrical in, I was thankful to him, but I was thankful to the Lord that he provided somebody with a generous heart. And so maybe it's those opportunities where we give, right? We give of ourselves in order that people can be thankful. People can feel loved. People can be, they can feel appreciated, seen, and, and all those things.
Jim, this is not necessarily a pushback on what you just said, but I mean, you're getting us close to Christmas when you're when you're giving what you're doing. But part of what we have to remember when it comes to Thanksgiving is, just pausing and just understanding, man, God graced us with whatever we have. None of this is ours, and God is the one that's graced all of us with it. And just resting in that moment. I mean, I was just thinking of as everyone was sharing, I was thinking of Sabbath and Sundays and the like. And as a pastor, Sunday is the most anxious day of my week. I'm going into Sunday. I haven't slept all night Saturday, and I have to talk for some period of time. And is everything going to go right? Is a light going to fall out of the roof of the church? I don't know. But there's a lot of anxiety that happens on Sunday. And then it's a long, busy day, and there is no rest and reflection that happens on that day unless I carve that time out from my day. And it's just thinking, well, I mean, Thanksgiving, this is a chance for us to do a Sabbath, for us to stop and say, whoa, look at what has happened over the year, and thank God for everything he's done. He's been here with us this entire time, ups or downs, how difficult things have been or how joyful things have been. God has been with us this entire time, and just stopping to reflect on that. And I mean, that's part of the big meal, right? We all get together and eat an entire turkey and just sit back and say, wow, God allowed us in a spot to be able to have one another and be able to eat and hang out together. But it's just reflecting on that. So it's just, it becomes very, very simple, but that's a distinction. There's a creator creation distinction, and reflecting on the creator and what he's done.
Yeah. One of the things that we're trying to be more intentional on is the concept of family dinners. Now that Chris and I are both out of our houses, we've moved away, and we've, the leaving and cleaving together is a beautiful thing, but there's also something beautiful about still having that family, right? Like your family grows. It doesn't shrink just to the two of you, it grows. And so we've tried to plan these weekly family dinners with both sides. And that is something that takes intention, and it takes that sacrifice of time, but it's worth it. Like last week, we got to have dinner with my family, and they actually came over to the apartment, and we got to celebrate a late birthday for Chris, and just kind of get together and hang out. And then last night we went over to his parents' house, and we got to have soup and just eat together, and it was so much fun. And I actually last night totally forgot my phone, which is something that I've been doing more often. I forget my phone places, and I don't know if it's just me getting older or turning into my mom. I am not really sure, but I have started leaving my phone places, and it was really nice to just be able to sit in the moment at the dinner and be with family and just have that time and not have the option of a distraction. I didn't even really notice that I forgot it until at the end, and I was like, do I have where is my phone? Which was like just a reflection. I got to get back home and be like, you know, the fact that I didn't even realize I didn't have my phone, like we had such a good time and we were just like hanging out. And that's what Thanksgiving is about, you know, like whether there's football on the TV or not, you know, we're able to hang out, we're able to sit around, we're able to talk and catch up with some people we might not have gotten to see throughout the year. And, you know, other family that maybe we do see on a weekly basis, but it's just as special to see them every single week as it is to see the people that we see every, you know, few months. And so I think that perspective and that, you know, place is where I'm trying to get to, you know, more regularly. Like, hey, I am thankful for you, and I want to show that. I want to, you know, say, hey, I love you and I want to spend my time with you. So I'm gonna, you know, put aside whatever things I have in my planner that say, ooh, I'm important. And I'm going to say these people, this time is more important than the tasks, you know, that I have to do, than the ads that pop up and say, you know, buy me, buy me. No, the people are more important to sit with. We don't have to have all of these things and this stuff. It's the presence. It is the presence in the moment.
Yeah, you know, you're so right. I mean, I really like that. It is. I mean, isn't that the greatest gift though? Is just being present, knowing somebody's present. And so,
Yeah. And
I'm going to start leaving my devices alone. You know, I'm just
well, no, hey, look,
I say that facetiously, but I mean, it's true, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, I agree.
But as a society, we've gotten so used to people just kind of looking at their stuff, you know, I mean, but that's not right. But I mean, even when we see people looking at it, we feel like they're not present, right? I mean, we don't feel there's somebody more important. But I love what Kayla said, is just that, you know, that you really are present when you're not with your phone, when you're not with your device, you just really are present. And that, I mean, what an awesome gift.
Yeah. And the weird thing is we've done things to what we think can mask it. You know, my folks, they make me laugh. They've got the little watch. And so instead of looking at their phone now, they'll, and no watch makes you have to tap it this much, you know? And I'm like, okay, so again, you might not be looking at your phone, you know, but and this is where I just wonder what if the church was so, yeah, because you're right, Jim, we talk about making America great again. We talk about saving America. We talk about America, and then we talk about, you know, God bless America. What if American Christians live though, as if they were blessed by God, and they said, here's society, okay, 2 days out of the week. And it says silly, but what if like on a Wednesday and Sunday, Christians put down their phones and got off social media for 2 full days during the week? I would imagine that concept of Sabbath that Phil's talking about would start to root itself. And then this idea of presencing would become a reality, because my guess is that if not number one, close to number one or number two, distractions are taking us away from the other is our phone. You know, I met with people in my role as pastor who they are wondering what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day for food and stuff, but they have an iPhone, you know, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't have a cell phone, but it's the way in which we prioritize our lives. You know, I know for myself, like with Kayla, it would be a surprise to me if I walk away from my phone and don't realize that we go, that's almost like we're walking around naked, you know, that we're walking around without our clothes on and we're like, I didn't even realize that I was naked, you know? And when you tell people you didn't have your phone, most people are like, oh, are you okay? You know, how is that? You know, because it's become like it's become so much a part of who we are. It's like we transition into the phone without realizing we are becoming a part of this social media, you know, the whatever you want to call it, whatever analogy, cogs in the machine, you know, less than, because we're becoming less distinct, right? We're moving into sameness. And so I think that's so important, the need to figure out, well, what is Sabbath? You know, like Phil, you were talking about it. You didn't take off like yesterday. A lot of people were still working. Might that be the case that we've never Sabbath? We never stopped to just be thankful because yesterday we make into contention, right? Whether you're pro-military, not military, you know, do I celebrate the veterans? Why can't we just get to a point where Christians are leading the way to say, look, we're celebrating this group of people because of who they are. It's not so much of everything that we've done, because when we start getting into the basis of what people do and that justifies their celebration or their demeaning, then it's about these acts. And then we start to get into the ambiguity of, well, what is a good act? What is a bad act, right? But if we see the person in front of us like Jesus did, and this comes back to the heart of the Christian, that yes, every day there's a weird tension of, am I going to live for the world, or am I going to live actually for the person in the world? Because the world is made up of people. You know, we can argue all we want, are there many universes, are there many worlds and all this stuff. The truth is that I know that there is this world, this earth, and that this earth would be nothing but dust and material without you, you know. And if no one else was around, I wouldn't want to be here. That's the reality. Is no matter how irritating, you know, people are, or inconveniencing people are, the fact is that there's still a need in my life. And that's because I need the other. I am not who I am without you. And I just don't know where that's gotten lost. And maybe it is the social media. Maybe it is the marketing, the over marketing of ourselves, such that we have become actually a utility. No longer is the person meant relationally with each other. In fact, we are. I was talking, Kayla, we were talking about this, you know, about with my son, about relational, because I said, oh, well, the difference is Christians look at things from a relational standpoint. He said, but everything's relational. Even when the person in front of you is utilized as a tool that we're using and exploiting, there's relationality there. That's the problem. That's the problem with a lot of assault and sexual assault, is that it's done relationally. It's done by a person that we know. It's a misuse of relationality. Well, could that not be the case because the church has removed ourselves from this ongoing interactiveness, and we've allowed society then to redefine relationality such that it's sameness now, as opposed to distinction? Phil, you were talking about distinction in a class that I'm teaching. You know, we're talking about the Trinity, and a lot of times I have to remind the students that the Father, Son, and Spirit, they're not entities, they're not forms, they're persons, and they're distinct but inseparably linked. There's never a time where the Father is without the Son, and there's never a time where the Son is without the Spirit. And they're all one, but they're distinct. The Father is not the Son, but they're also God. You know, I was reading, I was talking with my dad, because he said, you know, God then leaves the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, but as long as we recognize, though, the Spirit is God, you know, so that we see God's presence all around. And I think when we not acknowledge, what I think you said it, Phil, that none of this is ours. That's the most liberating thing, you know, is the materialism and all these things. I actually can let go of them, because once I realize that they're not mine, then they lose their power to own me. You know, they lose their power to enslave me and like to really take control of me. And so that knowledge, that need of so many, I wonder if that's the need of the church today, is to say, hey, you are so much more than your stuff, you know. But maybe because of the lack of the church seeing that, that's where then we just catapult over Thanksgiving, because if we pause to give thanks, then we have to recognize maybe that this world and the goodness of this is not simply because of me. You know, whereas in America, we're told, oh, anything that you have, it's because of your hard work and what you've done. And if you don't have it, well, then you're not working harder than this person or this person, right? My dad says it all the time. When he started school in his engineering program, the teacher said, look to your right, look to your left. You know, one of you will, you know, the two of you will not be here. And because it's competitive, and it's all about, well, what are you doing? As opposed to saying, look to your right, look to your left. In the next week, you're going to need the person to your right and to your left, so that the three of you can be here together, right? And there's this weird tension, because like you were saying last week, Phil, sometimes though, as a teacher within the church, you have to let pastors know you're going to be rocked. You're going to be crushed. And if those pastors, though, don't have that community to, you know, they're gonna get lost, man. They're gonna drown, and so it's just like this relationality. I feel like we have allowed, what you said, Jim, we've allowed society to take relationality and commandeer it and redefine it. And so what then does that leave the Christian to do?
Yeah, a really quick statement. I mean, I think part of it is just, what we're talking about is consumerism, right? I mean, I think it's consumerism, even in the church. We come to church because we want to go to church because of the program they have, because of the things they have. And then we even have the gall to say, you know what? I really didn't like his sermon. Maybe I won't, and it's that consumer mentality. Whereas when we look at the scriptures are all about making. It's about production. It's about producing. It's about working the fields. It's about the harvest. And so, maybe that's where we lose that relational piece, because it becomes like, what do you have to offer me? Instead of saying, hey, this is, I'm going to help you in the fields. And that, great, the reality is that, great ministry happens because there are a few people that are willing to sacrifice and put the time in, the effort in, like Phil. Those type of ministries, when people look and say, wow, Phil, that is an awesome ministry. But that takes you getting up, at weird hours and being part of it. There's a sacrifice, but we only want to be sold by what looks really nice. We want to be sold by the brochures of, hey, look at this great ministry. We're tied with this great ministry, and so I think, the relational, maybe the relational tension, it's a consumer relationship. It's a consumer mentality that has leaked into the church instead of this. How do we become producers? How do we become harvesters? How do we see that, like what Phil does, is that these long, hard relationships, these things that don't always work out, the relationships that you build and fall through, but there's the relationships that continue to grow. It takes time, and that, the consumer mentality or the consumer culture does not want that. They don't want to hear that. They just want to only hear the great stories that, and then we want to invest in just the great stories instead of the being part of the hard work. And so.
Matt, your repair from earlier in the week, the microwave. We are definitely a microwave society. We want relationships to happen quick, life to happen quick, and these things take time to develop. And even just becoming who we are as individuals, it takes time just to realize what your gifting is, how God's gifted you, how God's called you. So much of this, and we don't do. We can make each other happy on Christmas by buying each other stuff, and that's just a moment. But it takes so much longer to actually reflect and build into the people that we are and the churches that we want to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's what we're moving into, come the end of this month, the 28th, the first week of Advent. And so there's this awakening. Before we get there, though, we want to continue this dialogue. What does it mean to produce? Because like Jim was saying, and Phil was talking about this consumeristic mentality, so what does it mean to produce love? Can we be producers of love and relationality so that we can push against the idea that we ourselves are the product? And that's the continual talk of that we're going to step into next week. Be thinking about this, but be thinking this week, challenging ourselves. What if I intentionally leave my phone home? What if intentionally I put it in the desk drawer and say, you know what, for these next few hours, I'm just going to live unplugged, So challenging ourselves by finding ways in which we can actually step back and seek to live out that relationality that God's gifted us with, the ability to be with someone who's in our presence. And those are the little things that maybe we can say, hey, look, we are making a difference. One act, one thought, one moment at a time to really be history makers, like Christ calls us to be, ministers of reconciliation. First, reconciling ourselves to the one who created us so that we can then reconcile ourselves to each other. And that means reconciling then the material things that are put into our lives, allowing them to see the good that we can create them and use them for. And so we're stoked that you joined us today. We're excited for this next week and what the Lord has in store for you until we come back next Friday. And then things that happen, you could share right there to the right of us in the live chat during our live broadcasting of New Wine Uncorked. Also be mindful that come Sunday or Monday, this will be released again on our YouTube page so that you can go back and share this conversation. You can rewatch it. It also goes up on a podcast. If you go to anchor.fm, we have a podcast, or just go on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and just look up New Wine Scan. The podcast is actually called the New Wine Cast, the listening experience of new wine. So you can join that as well. But we're stoked that you're just thinking about this, because each one of us is thinking about this. This is what the Lord calls, says, who do you love? Who do you say I am? And those are questions that we have to answer daily. And so we're excited that you joined us this morning to step into those questions. So on behalf of Jim and Phil and Kayla, I'm Matt. This has been another episode of New Wine Uncorked. Until next Friday, we'll see you on the flip side. Have a good one.